You ever see something on the road that just makes you do a double take? That's exactly what happens when a GMC motorhome rolls by. Low-slung, futuristic, and looking more like a spaceship than an RV. This thing was way ahead of its time. Built in the 1970s, yes, the disco era, by General Motors themselves, it broke every rule in the RV playbook. Today I'm diving into what made this rolling time capsule so weird, so wonderful, and why it still has a hardcore fan base 50 years later. In the early 1970s, General Motors was already a powerhouse in the automotive world. They had dominant brands like Chevrolet, Cadillac, and Oldsmobile under their belt, and they were always on the lookout for the next big thing. At the time, the RV industry was booming. Post-war prosperity, a growing middle class, and the freedom of the open road made motorhome travel incredibly popular. But there was a catch. Most RVs back then were pretty rough around the edges. These early RVs were basically big boxy boxes slapped on top of truck frames. They rode rough, handled poorly, and weren't much to look at. They were functional, sure, but not exactly exciting. GM saw a huge opportunity. They figured, why not build something better? Something sleeker, smoother, and totally unique? And since they already had the engineering and manufacturing muscle, they decided to build the entire motorhome in-house. No outsourcing the chassis. No third-party conversions. This was going to be a fully integrated, GM-designed vehicle from the ground up. The result was the GMC Motorhome, launched in 1973. This wasn't just another RV, it was a full-on experiment in luxury travel on wheels. GM wanted to create a motorhome that drove like a car, looked like something out of the future, and offered a high-end interior that rivaled the best of its time. They pulled resources from across their divisions. Oldsmobile provided the engine and front-wheel drive layout, while their truck and bus departments helped with suspension and structural engineering. It was also a way for GM to showcase their technological capabilities. By building a motorhome, they could flex their innovation muscles in a new and growing market. It was almost like a concept car you could buy and live in. The design team had the freedom to try new things: curved sidewalls, a panoramic windshield, a low stance, and lightweight materials like aluminum and fiberglass. They weren't trying to make just another RV. They were trying to change the way people thought about RV travel altogether. But as groundbreaking as it was, the GMC Motorhome had a relatively short production run. Just 6 years, from 1973 to 1978. GM eventually pulled the plug, mostly due to internal politics and changing market conditions, but the legacy stuck. To this day, it remains the only mass-produced motorhome ever built entirely by a major automotive manufacturer. That alone makes it a unicorn in the RV world. And when you look at what GM managed to pack into this thing, style, performance, innovation, it's no wonder people are still obsessed with it 5 decades later. One of the most mind-blowing things about the GMC motorhome is how it moves. Unlike just about every other RV on the road, then or now, it was built with a front-wheel drive system. That might not sound like a big deal today, but in the 1970s, it was revolutionary. And when you dig into why GM went this route, it all starts to make sense. They borrowed the drivetrain from the Oldsmobile Toronado, a big, powerful front-wheel drive car that was already proving itself in GM's lineup. Under the hood was a 455 cubic-inch V8 engine, paired with a TH425 transmission. This setup delivered serious torque and pulling power right to the front wheels. By eliminating the need for a rear driveshaft and axle, GM completely changed the way the RV was built. Without a driveshaft running down the middle, the floor could sit much lower to the ground. That gave the motorhome a lower center of gravity, which made it more stable and better to drive, especially in crosswinds or on twisty roads. It also meant more headroom inside without making the vehicle taller. The end result was a motorhome that didn't just handle better than its competitors, it handled like a full-sized station wagon. For people used to lumbering RVs that swayed all over the road, the GMC Motorhome was a total game changer. GM didn't stop there. To support the rear of the coach, They engineered a unique suspension system using twin air springs and a bogie-style tandem axle setup. That air ride system not only cushioned the ride, but it could also self-level at campsites or on uneven roads. Combined with the front-wheel drive layout, this setup delivered a ride quality no other motorhome could touch. Owners often describe it as floating down the road, which is not something you hear every day in the RV world. The front-wheel drive design also freed up space in the rear, which was perfect for creating flexible, livable floor plans. With no rear axle in the way, designers had more room to work with, and they used it to create layouts that were open, airy, and surprisingly modern. That design freedom helped set the GMC apart from the boxy, cramped RVs of its time. So yeah, front-wheel drive in a motorhome might seem strange on paper, but in practice, it was one of the smartest engineering decisions GM ever made. It solved problems RV owners didn't even know they had, and it gave the GMC motorhome an edge that still holds up today. Step inside a GMC motorhome, and you're immediately transported back to the 1970s. But not in a bad way. The interior wasn't just groovy. It was surprisingly well thought out. GM didn't treat the living space like an afterthought. They put real design work into it, creating a comfortable and functional environment that felt more like a small apartment than a rolling shoebox. You had your choice of floor plans. Over 20 different layouts were available throughout the production run. Most featured a rear bathroom, mid-coach kitchen, and convertible sleeping areas, but GM gave owners options for lounges, dinettes, bunk beds, and even desk spaces. The clever use of space was ahead of its time. Storage was built into every nook and cranny, and you could reconfigure much of the furniture to suit your trip, whether that was a weekend getaway or a cross-country adventure. Materials were typical of the 1970s, with lots of wood grain, earth tones, and shag carpeting. But even today, it holds up surprisingly well, especially in restored models. GM used quality hardware, real cabinetry, and durable fabrics. And because of the unique structure of the vehicle, with a low floor and wide body, it felt roomy, not cramped. You didn't have to hunch over, and the windows let in a ton of natural light, making the interior feel open and inviting. One of the most forward-thinking elements was how everything was integrated. From the heating and cooling systems to the plumbing and electrical, GM designed these systems to work together efficiently, which wasn't always the case with RVs back then. It was user-friendly for people who weren't necessarily mechanics or electricians. And get this, some models even came with a built-in blender and ice maker. That might sound like a small detail, but it showed that GM wasn't just building a vehicle. They were crafting an experience. This was the kind of coach that made people want to hit the road and stay out there. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was about enjoying the journey in style. If you've ever seen a GMC motorhome in person, you know, it doesn't look like anything else on the road. Even 50 years later, it still draws attention wherever it goes. The design is sleek, curvy, and almost futuristic, especially when you compare it to the boxy RVs of its era. It was bold then, and honestly it still is today. The body was made from a combination of aluminum and molded fiberglass panels, which was practically unheard of for motorhomes back then. Most were built like sheds on wheels, flat sides, right angles, and not much thought to aerodynamics. But the GMC motorhome looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. The windshield curved into the roof, the sidewalls had a gentle taper, and the whole body sat low and long on the chassis. It was airlessy, aerodynamic, modern, and incredibly stylish. One reason it could pull off that low-slung look was the front-wheel drive design. Without a rear axle or drive shaft, GM was able to build the floor closer to the ground, which lowered the overall profile. That not only improved handling, but gave the coach its signature silhouette. The 23-foot and 26-foot versions each had a streamlined stance that made them look like they were moving even when parked. Color schemes from the factory were classic 1970s. Lots of avocado green, burnt orange, and tan. But the styling itself was timeless. The rounded corners, smooth lines, and integrated bumpers gave it a clean, futuristic vibe that just hasn't aged. Today, many owners restore them with updated paint jobs and custom wheels, but even a bone stock original still looks sharp. Another standout feature was the massive panoramic windows. The front windshield wrapped almost halfway around the coach, giving both driver and passenger an unbeatable view of the road ahead. Large side windows continued the theme, letting in tons of light and making the interior feel open. Even from a distance, the GMC motorhome is easy to spot. It doesn't blend in, and that's exactly what makes it so cool. When GM set out to build a motorhome that looked like nothing else, they nailed it. 50 years later, it's still turning heads, still sparking conversations, and still standing as one of the boldest-looking RVs ever made. It's one thing for a motorhome to be memorable. It's another for it to have a devoted fan base that's kept it alive and on the road for over half a century. But that's exactly what happened with the GMC motorhome. Even though production stopped way back in 1978, thousands of these rigs are still out there, many in better shape now than when they left the factory. And that's thanks to one of the most passionate communities in the RV world. From the moment it was released, the GMC motorhome attracted a different kind of owner. These weren't just folks looking for a weekend camper. They were engineers, designers, and DIY types who appreciated the technical beauty behind the machine. As the years went on, that spirit stuck. Owners didn't just drive them, they restored them, modified them, and built a whole culture around keeping them on the road. There are dedicated clubs across the country, like the GMC Motorhomes International and various regional chapters, where owners share parts, knowledge, and restoration tips. Online forums, Facebook groups, and YouTube channels are packed with how-to guides, project logs, and road trip stories. It's not uncommon to find someone who spent years rebuilding their GMC from the ground up, customizing it with modern drivetrains, solar power, upgraded interiors, and high-end paint jobs. And then they drive it, sometimes across the country, sometimes full-time. Parts availability has always been a concern with vintage vehicles, but the GMC motorhome community has tackled that head-on. Aftermarket suppliers have stepped in to reproduce hard-to-find components, and there are specialists who focus solely on restoring and upgrading these coaches. There's even a cottage industry of shops that do nothing but GMC motorhome work: repair, restoration, and full-on custom builds. What really makes the following special, though, is the camaraderie. These owners aren't just preserving old machines, they're keeping alive a shared experience. They meet up at rallies, campouts, and road events all over the country. When one owner breaks down, another one shows up with tools and spare parts. It's an old-school kind of community, built on helping each other and swapping stories over a campfire. And let's be honest, part of the appeal is that the GMC motorhome is just cool. It's different. It's got history. It stands out in a sea of white fiberglass boxes. For people who like to tinker, travel, and drive something unique, it checks all the boxes. 50-plus years later, it's not just surviving, it's thriving. The GMC motorhome is more than a quirky piece of RV history. It's a living legacy, kept alive by people who love it, not because it's the easiest or the newest, but because it's the most unforgettable. So there you have it, the GMC motorhome. A bold experiment from General Motors that broke every rule, drove like nothing else, and still manages to grab attention 50 years later. From its space-age looks to its surprisingly smooth ride, it wasn't just strange, it was brilliant. And thanks to the dedicated folks who keep them running, these rigs are far from retired. If you ever spot one on the highway or at a campground, now you'll know why it looks so different, and why the person driving it probably has a big grin on their face. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into RV history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the road with us next time. Safe travels out there.